Chief reporting for CTT. Chief tells tales. Last week I mentioned that we were going to the Gulf War, and I'm going to try to do the sequence of events. As I said, it was like before Thanksgiving. I think we got rid of our vehicles, so all we had to do was repack our bag over and over again. We're going to come back to that, repacking our duffel bags and our backpack, because our first sergeant is going to alter that. So I'll try to get the sequence events going over there. We flew sometime in January. I can't exactly remember when. I've got a diary around here. Oh, you're not supposed to keep a diary, but I did. But it's like my personal stuff, so whatever. We flew sometime in January. I can't remember exactly when. We flew out of Wichita, I think it was. We didn't go to Kansas City. I don't remember going to Kansas City, because the airfield that was outside of Fort Riley to the east, on the other side of Ogden, wasn't long enough for transportation aircraft at the time. So they were working on it, getting it ready, because did we land back? I don't even think we landed back on it. I don't even know if it's functional, to tell you the truth, anymore. So we flew from Wichita. We flew to Belgium, and I think we flew to Antwerp. So we were the second stick, so to speak. Half the battalion went on first flight. I was in the second flight with the other half of the 101st MI Military Intelligence Battalion. So we were the second stick of troops. And the first stick forgot about this. They had all the headquarters and everything else, but they forgot about us. So we flew to Belgium. Well, when I boarded the plane, I was the last soldier to get on the plane, because we were standing there, and I think Charlie Company, for some odd reason, I don't remember who we flew over with, but Charlie Company was the last company to board the plane. So I'm like, do I really want to rush to get on a seat where I'm going to be sitting like this, because we had on our military gear, so in case we landed in country, we were ready to fight with no ammunition. Had on our harness, had our canteens, had our M16. We were ready to fight, but without ammunition. We didn't even carry a bayonet, which I don't know why we didn't get them issued. Of course, I never got any bayonet training, even in basic. So, as we're getting on the plane, like I said, I'm the last soldier, and the stewardess comes up, taps me on the shoulder. She says, "Sir, or soldier, there's a seat right here." So I got to sit up with the officers, the first sergeants, and anybody else of importance. And I got that last seat, and all the rest of the soldiers, because I don't remember who was ahead of me. When he heard that I get this seat, he just turned around and groaned. And as I started to sit down and take off my gear, I could see some of my other fellow soldiers from Charlie Company just giving me the evil stare. They were jealous. That was the only time I ever slept on a plane, to tell you the truth. So we landed in Belgium, middle of the night. And when we landed, we blew a tire. So they took us to a runway that wasn't well used, especially late at night. And they surrounded us with police cars while they had to change our tire. And we also switched crews. And the crew that came on didn't want to come on, because the first sergeant will tell us later that they were afraid to go into a potential war zone. So this new crew that came on didn't want to be there. But while we were getting our tire changed, like I said, this is January in Europe, middle of the night. They left the doors open in case we had to evacuate. So we had this freezing cold wind, and we had on our BDUs with our military equipment. No field jackets. We left sunny weather actually in Fort Riley, Kansas. We left on a sunny day. So, switch the crews, change the tire. We get to Saudi Arabia, and we land just right before dusk. I mean, we're landing in a gorgeous sunset. We get to the tarmac. Just as we touch wheels down, it's like the sun just winked out. It was like night, well, it was night and day. So all of a sudden we had a little bit of the glorious golden sun in the distance, and then whoop, gone, and then darkness. And they had these lights, of course, around the plane, which probably freaked the crew out because it highlighted them. And since I got the last seat up in first class area, and of course I was only a sergeant back then, so first sergeant down the ramp, come over here. He was, they were looking for sergeant and below, 20 to 30 of us, and we became the baggage crew. So we were the baggage crew, and then sergeants were yelling at us to hurry because they wanted to get the plane out of there because potential, an airstrike might come in or missiles might come in flying. I mean, everybody was just acting like missiles were flying, so to speak. So we get done with that, and they basically also told us in case missiles did fly, you see this little thing around here on the side of the tarmac? That's where you leap in. That's going to be your protective trench. It's really not a trench. It's just the runoff from the tarmac of the runway, whatever. So we get done unloading the bags. I don't remember if we stacked them in a truck right away or not. I think we did. I think we just moved them immediately to a truck. Well, as I said, we were the second stick. The first stick had already landed and already vacated this area. There were no buses waiting for us to take us to the Khobar Towers. They had these, what the first sergeant called beer tents, German beer tents. That's what they look like. They had 3, 4 of them off to the one side. So we went in there and huddled up, and the first sergeant tried to cheer us up, even though it's the middle of the night, and freezing again. My mother had a hard time realizing that the desert is hot in the daytime and very, very cold at night. And I kept telling her mom, I said, sand does not retain heat. It's not large enough to retain heat like a rock can for a while. She had a hard time realizing that, even though I had to repeat it to her time and time again. So we get to Khobar Towers. Now we're talking about the same ones that got bombed years after the Gulf War was over with. So Charlie Company got assigned, I think we had a floor to ourselves, and we had like a two suites or 2 apartments, because these Khobar Towers are basically apartment buildings that they were building for the nomads and the Bedouins. But of course, nomads and Bedouins, like, we can't move these around, so they weren't occupied, because they were not occupied when we got there. So we had like one of the upper floors, and they said don't flush the toilet too often because not that much water. We found that out real fast. So basically, first sergeant made a rule: you got to do number 2. You hike all the way down the stairs. You go outside and use the porta-johns. And if you fill it up with the toilet with number 1, you fill the toilet up with number 1, and ladies, be judicious with your wiping of your whatever. So we ran out of water pressure very fast, but that was no bother. Everybody went outside anyways. This is an opportunity to go up and down the steps and have something to do, because once again we didn't have nothing to do because we were waiting to get to the port, to get to our vehicles, to get to our connexes so we can get to our duffel bags. We had a female soldier who got rather testy, so to speak. She got all the way over to the desert, got all the way over to the Khobar Towers, and then she finally was informed that, oh, you're pregnant. First trimester, so she's like, I'm taking off my gear, I'm taking off my Kevlar, and I'm going to wear my soft cap. Well, of course, she got yelled at because, hey, you're in the war zone, we don't care right now, and you just found out you are just pregnant. So you're not affecting the baby by wearing the gear, like all that extra weight's going to do something to a baby inside of a womb. But the Army has its rules. So we're there. I don't know how long we're there. We go to the port. And the day we go to the port, we also get into our connexes. And now it's like everybody gets their fair share of the concertina wire that we brought over with us. Well, everybody, even though we had the gloves, anybody knows what the concertina gloves look like. All it is a very thick leather gloves. And it looks like someone just put tons of staples in it. So that way you can still bend, but the concertina won't doesn't have a good grab on metal on the inside of these gloves. Well, everybody was even though we had the gloves, everybody was being so unfriendly with it. So I finally said, look, we got a job, let's get it done. So I stepped inside the concertina and I would pull it up with the gloves, and I ended up shredding a ripstop summer weight battle dress uniform, a BDU uniform. I mean, it was in shreds. I mean, I went home, it looked like I went through an explosion without getting any injuries, just my uniform got blown up. So as I'm busy ripping off all the patches and my name tapes and everything else, one of the female lieutenants of my company says, well, you know you can sew that uniform back up. And, you know, yes, ma'am, and also it'd be too sewn up to be a serviceable uniform by regulation. I mean, I shredded the ripstop. So that was my first loss of a uniform over there. I will have others. So finally, we get word that I can drive. I'm the driver of the 57, or not the 577, but the Humvee that's attached to our 577, and somebody decided that all the track vehicles with a few Humvees, we get to leave early. And I forgot to bring my show and tell item. I'll bring that next week. So as I said, the first sergeant's going to play with our packing list. So the first sergeant says we're going to go down to one duffel bag and one backpack. And the first order of stuff to stuff in the second duffel bag that's going to stay behind was all our wet weather gear, because we had the boot, we had the galoshes, the over boots, we had the wet weather parka, we had the wet weather parka pants, and poncho. So he said those 4 items most definitely, and anything else you think you can live without. And of course everybody was putting those stupid 4 poles that we had to bring all the way from Fort Riley. Everybody was sticking the 4 poles. I think just about everybody put the mosquito netting in there, because I don't think I remember seeing anybody use the mosquito net the whole time we were over there. And some other stuff. And then we put our B bags into the Connex that all our stuff, or all our equipment for the vehicles was in, because we put all our covers and canvas and whatnot on our vehicles, and had all our camouflage netting and all the camouflage poles. So Connex was empty, so our duffel bags went in that one. First sergeant said okay, but the first thing we actually needed was our wet weather gear, because by the time we got out to the field it rained, and it rained for several days, and the first sergeant apologized, but that was about the only time we really needed it. So we go on Tap Line Road, and there's a young Bravo Company first lieutenant, I think, put in charge of our convoy, because Bravo Company had about 8 track vehicles. We had about 8 track vehicles in Charlie Company, because everything was on track vehicles, to include the 577. I don't remember who drove the 577, but like I said, I got to drive my vehicle. And we went on Tap Line Road. Tap Line Road is the road that runs at the same angle as the border between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and that thing is, you see wrecks. I mean, you see wrecks. They're just wrecked vehicles off to the side of the road because they're too damaged to bring back to a city to fix. So they just leave the wreck there, and they probably strip them. We almost had a wreck, because I drove, and we just kept driving, and the lieutenant got upset, and I'm like, sir, you can't get upset. These guys got to pray, and they got to pray at sunset, because he was mad that they stopped the vehicles, because we put all the tracked vehicles on flatbed semi tractor trailers, and of course had Kuwaiti drivers and Saudi drivers and whatever kind of driver. Probably even had enemy driving our vehicles for all we know. And we had to drive to a spot where we could offload the vehicles. So we drove, I don't know what time of the day we started, but it wasn't bright and early, out of the harbor where we were at. I'll have to look that up. Didn't just now dawned on me where we started from. But we got on Tap Line Road and drove. Sunset, drove, and I'm like, Rodney's my TC. Rodney is a specialist. He's a very good soldier. I said, did you sleep? He goes, no, not really. But why? I said, I'm getting tired. So we got to a place to stop. We quickly switched out, and I was trying to sleep, but we weren't even 5-10 minutes down the road, and all of a sudden I heard the engine racing. You can hear an engine racing in the Humvee because it just starts, I mean, it's accelerating. And I glance over at Rodney. He's sitting there, 10 and 2 o'clock on the wheel, head's erect, but the eyes are shut, and I look, and we're passing the convoy. And I'm like, Rodney, don't panic, but wake up. Take your foot off the gas. So he slows down enough and gets back over where he should. And I said, well, obviously we need a break because I need to get back behind the wheel, and which I did later on. I think that's all I got the time for. I'm looking at the timer here, and I think the video's stopping at about 18 minutes on this camera. So I'm going to end it there. We still got a lot of the convoy to do because we go to a truck stop. That was hilarious. I mean, we don't see much. Like I said, there's only wrecks. And then, of course, when we get to a place where we unload our vehicles, boy, is that a fun time. We're trying to eat breakfast. That's how long we drove. We drove middle of the day and ate, and we're unloading the vehicles at breakfast before the sun really came up. So this is Chief. We'll do more of the convoy next week and get up to where our site is. So remember, Chief always says, freedom is not free. Hug a vet, thank a vet. If you're a vet, go thank another vet, because we gotta bond together, especially in these trying times that we have right now. So this is Chief signing out, and remember, freedom is not free.